carburetor, rubber boot, 3 clamps, some jets, and a rubber plug. You need to start by removing the OEM carb and the actual cable itself. We've already removed the seats and the cowling, as well as this cowling that covers the drivetrain underneath. Start by removing the clamps, the front of the carburetor, and the rear of the carburetor, and removing the zip ties for the cable all the way up to the throttle pedal. You need to remove the choke cable from the carburetor. It's a 12mm wrench. You also need to remove the fuel line. It's over here. On the bottom side of the carburetor, there are 2 wires. Disconnect these wires and just lay them aside because they'll no longer be used. Now we need to start loosening up and removing the throttle cable all the way up to the pedal itself. Down here there's a zip tie. Cut that zip tie. And any other zip ties that are holding the throttle cable to the frame. There are 2 zip ties over here on a coolant hose. Cut these. Cable comes up, comes down. There are 2 nuts right here securing it to the frame. 2 10mm wrenches. You'll be able to remove the cable from its post on the frame. On the gas pedal, there's a little rubber grommet. You pull the grommet back, and then there's a plastic clip holding the cable into the foot pedal. With a flathead screwdriver, pop the plastic clip out and remove it from the hold on the pedal. Push the pedal forward, you'll be able to push the grommet all the way through the hole in the floorboard. Now we can put the OEM carburetor aside. Next we want to remove this manifold. Loosen up the clamps, just pop it off. Now with the clamp provided, you can go ahead and install the carburetor. If you use any lubricant to lubricate this silicone connector here, you have to make sure that it's not petroleum based. If you use a petroleum based lubricant on this connector, it'll make the connector actually contaminated with petroleum and it'll actually slip off the intake manifold. A little bit of silicone spray. Take a little bit of finesse to get this boot over this manifold, seeing the manifold is actually quite larger on the outside diameter. Remember, once you have it squared up, snug down on the connector. You can now go ahead and route the throttle cable. We're now going to route the throttle cable all the way up to the foot pedal. You start by running the throttle cable down through here and attach it through this loop. We now run the throttle cable following these wires down to the floorboard as such. Continuing on, follow this path up to underneath the floorboards. Now we go to the other side. Now we need to install the choke cable. The choke cable will actually get installed on this side of the carburetor. What we need to do is we need to take the choke cable, pull it down, and route it up underneath the airbox to attach over here. You may need to cut some zip ties to do this. Once the choke cable is over here, you can install it into position on the carburetor. It's always helpful to use a little silicone spray on this O-ring to make sure that it seats all the way properly. If the cable's a little bit too tight, you always want to go back and check your routing. Now that the choke assembly is tight, we need to verify the action of the choke cable itself. Pull the choke lever out, push it back in, and repeat this a couple times. You should actually have a little bit of free play up here at the choke knob. If not, then the choke plunger could be hung up inside the carburetor and we want to check that. Now we're ready to install the fuel line. This float bowl bent can be routed down within these clamps. Because we removed the OEM carburetor, there's a breather tube that goes to the top of the OEM carburetor. We need to plug this up to make sure that sand doesn't contaminate the system. Remove the hose. There's a little rubber plug provided, seated into the plastic fitting. Now we're ready to check throttle cable. Throttle cable, you want to make sure that when you hit the gas pedal, the slide comes all the way up. So as I hit the gas pedal, I'll put my hand inside the carburetor and I can still feel that the slide is a little bit down. Using this adjuster up here, I'll turn that back a little bit. That's now all the way up. Now we can go ahead and tighten this adjuster and tighten the adjuster that's up here as well. Okay, two 10mm wrenches, that's tight. Be able to secure that. Also, you want to secure this nut up here on the top using a 10mm wrench. Now we're ready to go ahead and start the Rhino. It's not going to want to start at first because it's a brand new carburetor and there's no fuel in the flow. Pull the choke, crank it over a little bit. Crank it over a little bit. What we're trying to do is we're trying to actually let the fuel pump start to fill up the carburetor. If it doesn't start right away, there's actually an idle adjustment over here on this side. Here's the idle adjuster right here. You may need to turn this up to get it initially started. Turning it clockwise raises the idle. So about 2 turns. Okay. Turn another turn. Adjust the accelerator pump. What we're going to do is we're going to start the Rhino up and we're going to hit the gas. And if it has a lean spot, it'll show up as if the Rhino kind of wants to cough. Now we're going to step on the gas. Okay. That right there means that the accelerator part of the carburetor actually needs more fuel. We can adjust for more fuel at this screw right here at the top. If we back the screw out, it'll allow for this cam to actually move further and push the accelerator pump rod more to provide more fuel. So let's go ahead and see if we've had enough fuel. That seems to work pretty good. When we get the Rhino, we're testing out in the street, we can actually play with this screw to get the best throttle response possible. You want to test your accelerator pump from closed throttle to wide open throttle in very rapid movements. Now that the carburation install is complete, you want to go back through and make sure all your clamps and your hoses are tight. You also want to make sure that the throttle cable and the choke cable are routed in areas to where they can't get tangled up with parts like the drive shaft. You want to use zip ties where necessary, and also take a look at the throttle cable up by the steering column up in the front to make sure that nothing is touching. At this point, we're going to go ahead and reinstall the seats, and we're going to be ready for jetting. Now we got the seat back in here, we're ready to jet this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go take this Rhino and I'm going to go measure out about 600 feet out on the road. I'm going to start from a dead stop and accelerate to just a marker that, I'll put out there. I'm also going to record the top speed from the digital dash when I pass that marker. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start reducing the jetting from there. hit 41 miles an hour on my marker. The carburetor comes with a 165 main jet. Now I'm going to go ahead and install a 160 main jet and see what the speed is after I hit the change. Now going ahead and putting in the 160 main jet. As we reduce the jetting, the Rhino will pick up speed. You gain access by removing this access cap. Some fuel will come out when you remove that. There's the main jet right there. Flathead screwdriver, there's the main jet. Now have the 160 main jet installed. I'm going to reinstall the carburetor and go retest. We should pick up some mile an hour. Keep reducing the jetting until the best of performance is achieved. This particular Rhino ended up with a 155 main jet. Most Rhinos end up with a main jet between 150 and 165. Some have been as low as a 135 main jet. If you drop a jet size in your Rhino and it loses significant power, increase the jet size by an increment of 2. So if the jet was a 150, you would now be at a 160.